Okay, hi everyone, can you hear me? I am Chelsea Reich, Student Success Advisor here. So thank you for coming today. Today we have a very special guest speaker on campus. This is Dr. Ryan Decker. He comes to us from North Central College, and he will be our guest speaker number 5 for those of you in Student Success, our last one of the semester. But I know we also have a number of business students here, and I think physical fitness for law enforcement. Is that right? I heard earlier. So thanks for coming. This is Dr. Ryan Decker, as I said before, and he teaches a financial literacy course at North Central College. And it is a very, very popular course that sells out in like very quickly, 5 sections of it at his school. So we're really happy that he's coming here today to offer his words of wisdom to you. And he's, kind of created a financial literacy program at his college where he works at. So he'll talk to you a little bit about that today. And we are able to make this possible to have him come here from our partners at Wells Fargo that is sponsoring a grant for us. So thank you to our partners from Wells Fargo. And also remember, if you are taking notes on your computers, be mindful of others in the room. Keep your phones, out in your bags, and be attentive for our guest speaker today. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Ryan.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming and being here today. As Chelsea said, my name is Ryan Decker. I work at North Central College, which is just outside of Chicago in Illinois. It's about 40 minutes west of Chicago. But we only have 50 minutes together, and what I have prepared is honestly longer than 50 minutes. Some of the slides on here are content heavy, and I did that on purpose because if you want to know more about the stuff that I'm talking about, there is more information in these slides than I will talk to you guys about. So if you want a copy of the slides, you can contact me. My information will be up here at the end, or you can contact Student Success. They'll also have a copy of this presentation for you to take with you and use as you need it. So keep that in mind as we kind of push forward through this. I'm only going to very briefly talk about my background. You didn't come here to hear me talk about who I am. I came here to talk about money and what that can do for you. However, I do have some experiences that I think will be enlightening for you. So I grew up just outside of Chicago, didn't come from any financial means. My family, we qualified for government assistance, food stamps, so I didn't come from money at all. My parents believed in education, so I went to college, ended up going to graduate school, and ending up working at a good job at PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is the world's largest public accounting firm. But when I was there, I was working with a lot of other PhDs, lawyers, JDs, CPAs, accountants, individuals that had MBAs from very well-known institutions, and they did not understand how to manage their personal finances. They did not understand what the PwC 401k match was. So, seeing if business professionals don't understand how to manage their money, well then non-business professionals are probably completely lost. So I talked to my HR at PwC and said, can I start teaching our staff about money? They said, knock yourself out. So I started doing that, giving lunch and learn seminars about 401ks, IRAs, health insurance. And they were very well attended, very popular programs. And so PwC started to have me travel around and actually train teachers on how to teach personal finance, talk to stakeholders and fundraisers about how to raise money for financial education. And then a few years after that, as I was doing that for a few years, my wife and I had our first child. And at that point, I no longer wanted to travel internationally. I wanted to stay home. So I found a job pretty close to my house at a local college where I could still talk about money all the time. So I, as Chelsea mentioned, have a personal finance class at my college, which is a very popular course, because it's my experience that the education system in this country has failed you when it comes to training you and teaching you about money and how to manage your money for life after college, high school and after college. So my mission is to start to stop that and actually provide this education. So I run programs at local high schools out in Chicago. I run programs for large companies to talk to their staff about their financial benefits at their company. So I like to say that I will talk to anybody who will listen to me about money. So thank you all for being here and listening to me talk about money. If you're a finance major, I think we have a finance class here. At my college, I run our CFA program. We're also hopefully starting a CFP program, which are two major financial designations. I'm in the space quite a bit in the wealth management space, placing a lot of students that one day will manage some money. So if you do have any questions, hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. Ask me anything that you want to ask me about. However, let's get started. This is how I want you to view money. Money is a tool to provide you the life flexibility to spend your time as you want to spend it. That's what money can do, okay? That's all you should view money to do, is provide you options. Options to spend your time as you see fit. And as we study what makes people happy, what makes you happy is doing things that you're passionate about doing with people you care about spending time with. Money will allow you to do that. Money will allow you to, one day in the near future, you're going to wake up and say, I don't want to work anymore. Some of you might be at that point right now. But 20, 30 years from now, you're going to wake up and say, I don't want to work anymore. You should put yourself in a position for when that time comes that you can actually stop working. And you're likely not going to move to a warmer climate and sit on the beach every day. You're going to get tired of that. What you're probably going to be doing is doing something that you're more passionate about. Maybe it's volunteering or pursuing a lower paying job that you actually enjoy doing. But give yourself the opportunity to stop working full time when that time comes for you. The only way that's going to happen for you is if you plan ahead. So what are your options? How do you plan ahead? That's what this talk is about. Debt. When is debt okay to have? Well, this is not a talk about all debt is bad, because not all debt is necessarily bad. There are 3 purchases that we're okay with you borrowing money for. Doesn't mean you can borrow as much as you possibly can, but it means that it's not necessarily bad debt. Education debt. That's the first one. It's not necessarily a bad idea to borrow money to further your education. Education will open up options for you. And here in the trades, education is very likely to have a fantastic ROI, where return on investment, where you're in a program for 2 years or so, and then you're out there making your first initial salary is going to be more than your student loan debt burden. At a lot of 4-year institutions, that's not the case. In the trades, that's very oftentimes the case. So student loans, we'll continue to talk about them, is not necessarily a bad thing for all of you. But the other 2 up here, house. Nobody's going to have $200,000 laying around to buy a house. The average price of a house in this country is around $200,000. Obviously, there's some less and some more, but nobody has $200,000 laying around. In addition to that, your house is hopefully an appreciable asset, which means it will appreciate in value moving forward. So if there comes a time for you to get out of your loan, sell your house, there's a fairly good chance that's actually going to be a higher value when you end up selling it later on. So house debt is not necessarily a bad thing. That doesn't mean you should borrow as much as you possibly can. There are some great rules of thumb to determine how much of a house you can actually afford, but house debt is not necessarily a bad thing. Couple that with very low interest rates right now, house debt is not necessarily a bad thing. Auto loan debt. Now, auto loan debt could be a bad debt if you buy too much of a car. If you purchase a car that gets you from point A to point B in reasonable comfort and reasonable safety, a car is a fantastic tool to use. Debt is a fantastic tool to use to buy a car. But you're unlikely to have $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 laying around to buy a car. So as long as you purchase a reasonable car, reasonable house, reasonable education, debt is not necessarily a bad thing at all. Outside of these 3, we'd be hard-pressed to advise you going into debt to purchase an item. Credit card debt. You should use credit cards. Credit cards are a fantastic tool to manage your money, but credit card debt is very, very costly. Right? Very high interest rates on credit card debt. When it comes to budgeting, how should you actually spend your money? Right? How should you think about allocating your money between certain goods that you want to buy? Here's a great starting point. This is not a one-size-fits-all, but it's a great starting point. It's a 50-30-20 budget, and I like to start with the 20% to savings. This likely means retirement savings in a 401k and IRA, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But 20% to savings / building up an emergency fund / paying extra down on your debt. which leaves you 80% left to spend on everything else. Well, the two largest expense items that you will have on a monthly basis are going to be your house and your car. Those are fixed expenses that you won't be able to change because you pay the same amount to the bank every single month for those two items. So if you allocate 50% of your income to those debt items and those fixed expense items, 30% to a house, which leaves student loan payments, automobiles, groceries, phone bill, utilities as the other 20%, you're in pretty good shape, which will leave you 30% to spend on your wants. Okay, vacations, entertainment, going out to eat, things like that. Now, while this is a rule of thumb, this is going to be very hard for you to do early on in your life. Early on in your life after college, you have very low income, right? Hopefully the year that you graduate college, you will earn the least amount of money for the rest of your life, right? Hopefully your salary will only increase thereafter. What that means is you probably have student loan debt that you have to pay back. You probably need a new car. You might want to go rent an apartment or go buy a house. Maybe you'll have a life event, get married, it's expensive. You want to start going on vacations, and now you have disposable income to spend. You have a lot of expenses early on in life that are quite expensive. So this might be difficult to do early on, but as you start planning for that car purchase, as you start planning for that house purchase, keep these rules of thumb in mind when it comes to how you allocate your money. And for me, it starts with that 20%. If you are saving 20% of your income, you're going to be in fantastic shape. How do you do that is what we'll talk about throughout this talk today. But first, student loans. Since the majority of you do have student loans, the vast majority of students that attend college, 2-year or 4-year, have student loans. How do you manage your student loans? Well, federal government loans is what this talk is focused about because that's what the majority of you have are federal government loans, public loans, loans given to you by the federal government. The federal government caps how much you can borrow each year. For most of you in 2-year programs, you're just in the first 2 rows here, where you're capped at how much you can actually borrow. Okay? If you extend it to a 3rd year or 4th year or transfer to a 4-year university, your limits go up every year. But the average amount of student loan debt for somebody with a college education is around $30,000. That's nearly exactly the maximum amount the federal government is willing to lend to you, which means students generally max out how much they can borrow from the federal government. For a 2-year university, that's nearly cut in half. It's around $17,000 for an associate's degree in student loan debt, which is 2-3 years of student loan debt. But you're capped at how much you can borrow. If you're an average student, you're probably going to be graduating with $10,000 to $20,000 student loan debt with an associate's degree. Interest rates are important. Based on when you actually took out your loan, you're going to be charged a different interest rate when you start to repay your loan. So when you graduate, you will have 6 months of a grace period before your student loan repayments start. And then you will be charged the interest rate based on when you took out that loan. For those of you that took out loans for this fall term, you're going to be paying 3.73%. Last year it was 2.75%. Interest rates are starting to rise a little bit. If your parents borrowed money, I have the Parent Plus loan, the Parent Direct Plus loan, those interest rates are a lot higher. So if you can't borrow enough to go to college, oftentimes parents step in, and if your parents borrow money from the federal government for student loans, their interest rates are a lot higher. Something to think about. Perhaps the most important thing to tell you guys when it comes to student loans is you need to stay in touch with your loan servicer. Now, the federal government is in the business of extending you loans, but they're not in the business of collecting on those student loans. They hire out companies called loan servicers where you actually submit your payment to each month. Your loan servicer needs to be able to contact you if something changes. You need to be able to contact your loan servicer if you need to go onto a different payment plan, or if you need to pause payments, if you need to go back into deferment, if you go to graduate school. You need to be able to stay in touch with the loan servicer. They need to stay in touch with you. What is likely the case is that your current school email address is set up as your contact information at your loan servicer. You need to change that to your personal email address. You will lose access to your student email address some point after graduation. Do you know how long?
Get it for a semester after you graduate.
All right, so you get it for 6 months or so after you graduate. If the student loan company needs to contact you about payment changes, they need to be able to contact you. The first method of communication is going to be email. All right? So you need to update your email address before you graduate. You need to update your mailing address, all those things. You might think, well, once I'm on a payment plan, why would the loan servicer company need to contact me? Well, COVID. Currently, right now, students that have student loans do not have to make payments due to COVID. Interest rates on federal student loans are at 0% right now for COVID. You have the option, if you were actually in repayment right now, to stop paying your student loans and nothing bad would happen to you right now. The only way that you would know what to do or know about that program is if your loan servicer sent you an email about it. They need to be able to contact you, you need to be able to contact them. In my experience, students that are still in college have no idea who the loan servicer is. Well, you were told who it was. The link down here is a link for you to log into your financial aid and student loan account at the federal government. Logging in there will provide you the information that you need. All right, so keep that link in mind when you do this. Your login credentials are with the FAFSA. So the only way that you qualify for federal student loans is by filling out the FAFSA every fall. So I know you fill out the FAFSA because you have federal student loans, so you have an account. Repayment options. When it comes to repayment options, there's many that you can choose from. The standard do-nothing approach is the 10-year repayment option, which is if you do nothing and you just let your loan servicer tell you how much you owe every month, they'll give you a 10-year payment plan such that at the end of 10 years, your loans will be paid off in full. If you are not making enough money to actually achieve that 10-year repayment option, there are also income-based repayment programs where your monthly payment is based on your income. And just to make it utterly confusing, they give you 3 options which all look very similar. If it comes time for you to actually choose between one of these, there are resources on the federal government website to choose between which one of these is best suited for you, based on if you're single, if you have any kids or other dependents, if you're married, if your spouse makes a lot more money, maybe you don't want their income to count as your income. So there's some considerations if you're going to enter into one of these payment programs. But the key thing with these payment programs is, notice how long they are. If you graduate college when you're 20 years of age or so, and you enter into an income-based repayment program that's at least 20 years long, 20 years of age, 20 years of repayment, 40 years old. If you enter into an income-based repayment program, you're going to pay your student loans off when you're 40. You do not want student loan payments in your 40s. You frankly don't want student loan payments in your 30s, right? Life is going to get really expensive as you buy a house and have a mortgage and potentially have kids and have a lot more expenses. So if you can afford the 10-year repayment option, you should do the 10-year repayment option. However, many of you will actually work for a not-for-profit organization or a government agency. Federal government, state government, local municipality government, like Sioux Falls, the city of Sioux Falls. Government entities or not-for-profit organizations, like the local hospitals here, will qualify you for public service loan forgiveness. Public service loan forgiveness is the program that we have to forgive your federal student loan debt. But you have to follow directions. These are the directions. Condensed, obviously, more information is down here at the link. But if you have student loans and you work for a not-for-profit or government agency, you really need to consider this. What this is that when you graduate, you will tell your loan servicer that you want to enter into public service loan forgiveness. They will then coordinate how this happens, but you'll take all of your federal student loans, you'll probably have 3 or 4 different ones from different years, different terms, consolidate them into one single loan, and then enter into an income-based repayment program where your payments are based on your income. If you make 10 years of payments, whatever balance is left at the end of that 10 years is forgiven, which could be a sizable amount. And if your payments based on your income are actually lower than the interest that you're being charged, your student loan balance is only going to be increasing over these 10 years. So if you are going to be working for a not-for-profit or government agency, and you want to enter into this program, kind of ensure to yourself that you're going to be working for that type of employer for 10 years. Because if you leave, you no longer qualify. If you leave and work for a for-profit organization, a company, you no longer qualify, which can cause some trouble for you because you haven't been paying a whole lot because the payments are based on your income. Other small things to think about, if you do qualify for this, you need to certify your income every year. So you need to tell the student loan servicer how much you made the prior year. It's very easy to do with electronics nowadays and electronic systems, but you need to do that every year because they need to base your payments based on your income, which is judged by last year's tax return. And you need to certify your employment every year. So you need a letter signed by your employer that says that you actually do work for a not-for-profit or government agency, and then those payments for that year are certified and they qualify. This is a fantastic option for those of you who are going to be working for qualified employers. Which again, student loan debt is not necessarily a bad thing if you qualify for something like this, because the balance is forgiven after 10 years of income-based payments. All right? Yes, sir.
So what happens if you work for one government-based job and you transfer to a different city to work in the same kind of job?
As long as it's still a government-based job, you still qualify. What would change is that you now need your new boss to certify your employment. But nowadays, the bosses and executives are used to signing those forms because a lot of students are in these programs. So as long as you have 120 payments, which is 10 years, working for a qualified employer, you qualify, and that employer can change. Absolutely. Good question. One other quick comment on student loans. Subsidized versus unsubsidized student loans. Your student loans that you have with the federal government are likely to either be subsidized or unsubsidized. If you have subsidized loans, and you will know by the title of the student loan when you log into your loan servicer, if you have subsidized loans, the government is currently paying interest for you. So you don't owe anything right now. If you have unsubsidized student loans, the government is actually charging you interest right now as you sit here today. If you don't pay that unsubsidized interest before your loans actually enter repayment, which is 6 months after graduation, the unsubsidized accrued interest goes into the principal balance of your loan. So if you borrowed a $5,000 loan your first year here, and then you were charged interest because it was unsubsidized your first year and your second year, and you didn't pay that off before your loan's activated, that $5,000 loan now starts looking like a $5,500 loan. We're going to talk about compound interest later in the stock market. This is how you actually pay compound interest. You are going to be paying interest on interest if you don't pay off your accrued unsubsidized interest before your loan's activated, because they enter the principal balance of your loan, and then you will pay that interest rate moving forward on that new higher balance. Do not pay compound interest. So pay off the accrued unsubsidized interest before your loans activate 6 months after graduation. Okay. Quick pause here. Any follow-up or immediate questions about student loans? All right, let's jump into investing. When we think about investing, we think about a time horizon longer than 7 years. If you have a purchase that you're going to be making within 7 years, like before 7 years, you should not be investing that money. That should be sitting in a checking account, a savings account, or a money market account, right? Something that is not risky. Beyond 7 years, we're probably talking about something like retirement. So retirement is something that you will save for the next 40 years. Because when you retire, you will have no income from a job. So you need to support yourself somehow. The 3 ways that you'll be able to support yourself are right here. We think of this as a 3-legged stool. Social Security, government-provided benefits, company-provided benefits, 401k or a pension, as well as personal savings. The vast majority of jobs pay into Social Security. So you are going to be paying 6.2% of every single paycheck that you have into the Social Security pot. So when you retire one day, you will actually get a check from the federal government. That's Social Security. You're going to be in that program. 401k, that's an investment-oriented vehicle that your company is going to provide you for you to invest in. And they will likely actually match some of your contributions as well. Pensions do still exist at certain employers, government employers, some trade organizations, but pensions aren't extremely popular these days. You're more likely to have a 401k than you are a pension. And then your personal savings. Your personal savings can come in a variety of forms: checking account, savings account, individual retirement accounts, which are IRAs, and regular brokerage accounts where you invest your money outside of an IRA. Okay? This is what a normal person's investment picture looks like. They have a 401k, and they have the option, and I'll dive more into this here in a few minutes, they have the option to invest in that 401k via traditional means or Roth means. You're going to have both. You'll also open up an IRA. That's your own personal savings for retirement. You're likely to have both a Roth and a traditional IRA. And then you have your bank, where you have your checking and your savings account. So you are likely to have multiple different savings and investing accounts. This can get somewhat complicated if you don't know what you're doing. And quite frankly, if you don't know what you're doing, what's going to happen is you don't even start doing any of these. So part of the goal today is to provide you enough information and motivation and encouragement to get started. Might be right after you graduate when you get that job, but get started as early as possible. What's not listed up here are sort of after-tax brokerage accounts, like things like Robinhood and Webull. Robinhood is an after-tax brokerage account where the money that you invest in there, if you see gains on that money or dividend payments, interest payments on that money, you have to pay your current tax rate on. The cool thing about these retirement vehicles, 401ks and IRAs, they're tax-protected accounts. So you don't have ongoing tax bills with these. There are tax implications, which I'll jump into, but you should really only be thinking about a Robinhood or one of those like new accounts if you've already maxed out your 401k and already maxed out your IRA, which means you're saving $25,000 a year. Can't imagine you guys are doing that right now, but hopefully one day soon you'll be able to. Now, if you have some fun money that you're perfectly fine losing, instead of going out to dinner one night, you invest some money in Robinhood, that's fine as an entertainment vehicle, but it's not really fine as an investment vehicle because we have these other tax-protected accounts, 401ks and IRAs. One of the biggest questions you will have when it comes to saving for retirement is, do you invest traditional or do you invest Roth? And the big question is, when do you want to pay taxes? Do you want to pay tax now or do you want to pay tax later? First one listed here, that first column, is traditional or pre-tax, which means if you invest in a traditional 401k or a traditional IRA, you are not paying tax on that money now. You actually lower your income right now by the amount that you save for retirement. So you're actually going to lower your tax bill today by saving in traditional accounts. But the government's going to get their money. So if you save in a traditional account, you save on taxes now, but that money and the growth on that money for the next 30, 40 years is going to be taxed when you take it out, when you retire. So when you retire and you look at your traditional account balance, you have to pay tax on that. Probably don't want to do that. However, you'll have some tax savings today. The opposite of that is a Roth account. A Roth account is where you actually pay tax today. So think about a Roth account, a Roth 401k, or a Roth IRA as something that you invest in after you pay taxes. Now, since taxes are taken out of every week's paycheck, think about the Roth IRA as something that you invest in with money that's in your checking account. Since you've already paid tax on that money and the growth on that money for the next 30 to 40 years, which could be tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, is tax-free when you retire. So when you look at that investment account when you retire, you can spend all of that money. You don't have to pay tax on that money in a Roth account. So there's a lot of benefits for investing in a Roth 401k and a Roth IRA, especially when your income isn't high. And if you graduate college and get that first job, your income is likely to be the lowest it ever will be for the rest of your life. So your tax bill will be the lowest it ever will be for the rest of your life, now and for the next few years. So pay tax now and save that money in a Roth account such that that money and the growth on that money is tax-free when you retire. There are some other considerations about how to decide between Roth and traditional. Those are detailed here. This is one of those slides where I'm not going to walk you through everything that's listed here, but some pros and cons and some things to think about when it comes to traditional and Roth IRAs. And again, some other considerations on how you can invest and if you should do a traditional or Roth IRA. The general rule of thumb is if you're okay paying tax now and you don't have an extremely high income, invest in a Roth so you can get tax-free money later. If you are at a high income, that's kind of relative to you. If you are at a high income, you might be interested in saving on taxes now, so a traditional account might make sense to you. I said you're going to have both, however. You're going to have both because if you have a 401k, your company is probably going to contribute to your 401k on your behalf as well. If you work for a not-for-profit organization like a local hospital, you're going to have something that's called a 403b. It's the same thing as a 401k. Your company is likely to invest in your 401k or your 403b for you as well. Your company's contributions will always be traditional. By law, they have to be. So if your company is going to invest in traditional money for you, maybe you want to balance that out with some Roth savings of your own. So another sort of check mark in that Roth bucket. So you're going to have a traditional 401k. You're going to have a Roth 401k. IRA, it's your choice and what you want to do. But it's also unlikely that you're going to stay working for that first employer for your entire 30 to 40-year working career. When you leave an employer, what you're going to do is you're going to take that 401k and move it into an IRA. So you're going to move that traditional 401k that your company contributed for you, move it into a traditional IRA. You're going to take that Roth 401k that you invested in and move it into a Roth IRA. So you're going to have all 6 of these accounts throughout your investing life. You need to know what these terms mean. 401k is workplace sponsored. IRA, individual retirement account, your own personal savings. And of course, you're checking your savings at your bank. Any comments or questions about those topics? Okay. You also have other questions. How are you actually going to invest your money? So it's one decision to say, yes, I want to invest. It's another decision to say, how do I want to invest, Roth or traditional? And then it's, what do I want to invest in? Well, the investing industry is extremely complex and confusing. When we think about equities or stocks, you have large companies, you have small companies, you have mid-sized companies, you have international companies, you just have domestic companies. We have bonds. So governments issue bonds that you can buy that are more conservative and fixed rates, so not as risky. You can buy corporate bonds, highly rated company bonds, lower rated company bonds. And then we have these other categories, real estate, commodities, options, private equity, hedge funds, and today's buying cryptocurrency. It's unlikely that you'll actually be able to buy cryptocurrency in an IRA or 401k anyway, but that's probably going to change relatively soon. So you have a lot of options. The financial industry wants to convince you that managing your money and picking your investments is difficult, hard, confusing, and something that you shouldn't do. You need to rely on experts to do that for you. You don't. You need to make your investing life as simple as possible. And simple is good here. Through an index fund. An index fund is something that just tracks the overall market, where you're not trying to pick and choose the winners or losers because, sorry to disappoint you, but you can't predict the future. And anybody that tells you that they can predict the future, can't. Anybody that tells you that this industry or this company is going to go do really well over the next 6 months, 12 months, 1 year, they're just making an educated guess. They don't know for sure. So turn off that financial entertainment news, just invest into a low-cost index fund. And if you choose a Fidelity fund, like I have listed out here, you actually pay 0 cost to invest. Doesn't cost you any money to open up an IRA at Fidelity. And if you invest in a fund that has 0 cost, you're not paying anything to actually invest in that account. So 0 fees to invest. What's stopping you? Probably stopping you is you don't know what the terms Roth and IRA mean, but now you do. So if you invest in a low-cost index fund that just tracks the overall market, you're going to see a rate of return of 8 to 10% on average every single year. That's going to be 97% of people who actually try to pick and choose what's going to do well. Year after year, decade after decade, we track how well active managers do and how index funds, passive managers do. The passive management beats the active management every single year, every single decade. So just track the market, don't pay anybody to manage your money for you, and you'll be better off than 97% of the people out there. It is that easy. It is that simple. When it comes to an IRA, I'm a big proponent of not paying anything to open up an IRA and not paying anything or very little to invest in an index fund. You'll do that at the two largest mutual fund companies, Vanguard and Fidelity. So you go and open up an IRA at Vanguard or Fidelity, look for those funds that I've listed there, which are low-cost index funds, set it and forget it. Set up automatic contributions every single week, every single month. Sit back, and in 20 years, you'll have a substantial amount of money. In 40 years, you'll easily be able to retire. It can be this easy. We also have something called a target date retirement fund. A target date retirement fund is where you pay somebody at these large companies, Vanguard and Fidelity, a little money every single year to actually allocate your money for you between stocks that are more aggressive but also more risky, and bonds, which are going to give you a lower rate of return but are more conservative. So they're going to change your asset allocation every year until you retire and after you retire as well. Right now, while you're young and you have 30 to 40 years to save, you can take the market swings and ups and downs because you just want capital appreciation. You want your money to grow, and it's going to grow faster in stocks. But when you reach the age of 45, 50, 55, and you're trying to actually retire, you don't want to see your stock portfolio drop by 20% overnight or 30% like it did under COVID. So you want to get more conservative as you age. A target date retirement fund at one of these large companies, Vanguard or Fidelity, are very cheap, easy options where you can just set it and forget it. Fantastic option if you have no idea what I'm talking about today. If you don't care what I'm talking about today, target date retirement funds, fantastic option for you. But again, try to stay with the companies that I mentioned, Vanguard and Fidelity, because they can get rather expensive at some of these other companies. Set it and forget it strategy. You're going to need $1 million to retire. And quite frankly, you're probably going to need more depending on how you actually want to spend your retirement. Are you going to have grandkids you want to spoil? Are you going to want to go on a lot of vacations? Do you want to buy a vacation home in a warmer climate? You're going to need more than $1 million. But if we think about $1 million as being a nice round number to target, this chart shows that it's absolutely feasible. So what this chart shows, and in the green highlighted part, I have a bold number of 63. Let's talk about that number, and then it'll explain this chart. If you're 20 years of age and you save $4,000 a year in the stock market in one of those index funds I mentioned, you'll have $1 million at age 63. Okay? That's when you're going to want to retire. You're going to want to retire before age 63. But $4,000 a year might not seem feasible for you right now, given that you actually might not even have a job right now. And it might be kind of hard for you to save $4,000 a year, which is about $300 or so per month early on. Save what you can early on and just continue to ramp up your savings every year. And trust me, you'll be able to save $4,000 a year. An IRA that you will open up on your own, you can save $6,000 a year in the IRA. So a good target for you to hit is invest in your 401k to get that company match that they're going to give for you, and then max out your IRA. If you're doing that, you're going to be saving over $6,000 a year and probably closer to $10,000 a year, which is that gold bar. So if you're 20 and you save on average $10,000 a year, you're going to have $1 million when you're 50. If you save more than $10,000, obviously you'll have more. But if you have $1 million when you're 50, you're going to be able to retire earlier than 62, 65, 67, 70, like some of your parents or grandparents may have had to do. It's very easy, very simple to be a millionaire, but to save money. Thing is, you just have to start. And starting early is what will get you there due to compound interest. A few minutes ago, we talked about paying compound interest with student loans. In the stock market, you receive compound interest in two ways. One way is through dividends. a lot of these companies actually pay their shareholders, pay their owners, their stock owners, money every year in the profit that they have. What you're going to do is every time you get a dividend payment, it's just going to be automatically reinvested in that index fund into that stock portfolio. That's compound interest. They pay you interest, you just reinvest that, and that interest will then pay you interest, and you continue that cycle. That's receiving compound interest. You're also going to receive compound interest by pure growth of the stock market. If the stock market grows on average 8 to 10% per year, some years 20%, some years negative 5%, some years 8%, but on average 8 to 10%, it grows on top of itself. So if the stock market increases by 10% this year, and then it increases by 6% next year, that 6% is on top of the 10% that you earned this year. That's compound growth. So you see compound growth in the price and value of the stocks that you have, and also in the interest and dividend payments that you receive. So you want this to work for you for as long as possible. So invest as early as possible to receive this compound interest as early as possible. Some keys to your financial life. If you don't take anything else away, this is what I want you to take away. Money is a tool that can provide you the means to spend your time as you see fit. That's where you're going to receive value and happiness in your life. The key to having financial flexibility is keeping your fixed expenses low. Automobile and house. Automobile, something that'll take you from point A to point B in reasonable comfort and safety. For a house, 2 to 3 times salary for a price of the house. That'll likely ensure that you don't overspend on that house. And then invest 10 to 15% of your income in your 401k and IRA. I'd love for that to be 20%, but chances are, if you save 10 to 15% and then start paying down debt with the other 5% to get to 20%, it's probably what you're likely going to be doing. This is the key to financial flexibility, financial freedom, retiring when you want to, living a happy and good life. Some extra resources. If you want to know more, if you want to know more about like a DIY approach to investing, here's some resources. 2 links up there. The first one is about DIY, it's bogleheads.org. DIY, how can you manage your own money yourself? If you want to get more complicated than index funds, great strategies there. If you're going to be a high income earner, so go into the trades, but make a high income, White Coat Investor is the place for you. So White Coat Investor is kind of geared more towards doctors, but many people in the trades earn just as much as doctors can. So high income earner strategies there. If you're into Reddit, there's a bunch of Reddit subreddits and communities that you can subscribe to. Again, it's the internet. Anything can be posted on there, but an educated person can screen out the good and the bad advice. So some great stuff there for you to poke through as well if you want to. Additional resources, the 2 websites that I said that you can open up an IRA very cheaply, Vanguard and Fidelity. Those are the websites up there. If you want a more active money management approach from a budgeting perspective or investing perspective, like where is my money invested, how will it grow? Mint for budgets, Personal Capital for investing, both free programs. Student loan resources, something I did not talk about today is actually refinancing your student loans. So actually moving them out of the government's purview into a private company for hopefully a lower interest rate. The most popular refinance company these days is SoFi.com. GoChange.com is actually a company that you can link up your credit card and your debit card to, and it rounds all of the dollars that you spend to the nearest dollar, the next dollar, and allocates those that extra round of change to student loan repayment. It's the only company I know that does that. Actually based in Chicago, I know the founders. Robo-advisors, Betterment, Wealthfront are 2 of the most popular ones these days. If you actually want somebody overlooking your finances, very cheap access to somebody overseeing your money and your investments at those companies if you want to open up an IRA with them. But great resources for you if you want to learn more, read more, actually start investing. And send me an email if you have any questions. One of the things that I mentioned early on in this talk that I like to do is I just like to talk about this stuff. So if you have questions, send me an email, call me up. That's my office line. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm based outside of Chicago, but hopefully you'll see me again on campus here as well. But reach out if you do have any questions about any of these topics. I tell all my students, all the people I come into contact with, treat me as a free financial advisor. I'll never charge you for advice. More than happy to talk. Are there any questions? General questions, specific questions about anything that we talked about, student loans, investing, budgeting, how to manage your finances, what to do now, things like that I can help answer? Yes, please.
So after the grace period, they just start sending you to your mail, like the bills?
Yep. Yeah. So now it's all electronic, but you will get a bill. You're going to set up automatic payments online. So your loan services through that website that I told you about, the government website, you'll be able to tell who your loan servicer is, the company that actually you submit money to. You just link it directly to your checking account is the most common thing to do. So every month it'll be taken out. But again, if you think that you need to be on a different payment plan than a 10-year repayment option, or you're going to work for a not-for-profit or federal government employer, then you need to think about public service loan forgiveness. So you need to email, contact your loan servicer and say, I think I might qualify for public service loan forgiveness. What do I need to do? And they'll tell you what you need to do. But yeah, you can log on right now and tell who your loan servicer is. You can start paying that unsubsidized interest right now if you wanted to, before your loans activate 6 months after graduation. But yeah, get on it for those of you that are going to be done with school in a few weeks or a few months. Good question. Anything else? Okay, we're probably out of time. Yep, 10:48, perfectly on time. 10:50 is when we're scheduled to end. I'll leave my contact information up here at the end if you want to jot down my email address or take a snapshot of this. Seriously, send me an email. I enjoy these emails. For those of you that are in the business field here, you're probably receiving some of this education. Those of you that aren't in the business field, you may have never seen any of these terms before. You need to know what they are. This is how you plan your financial life. I will stay up here. I'll be up here right now for a little bit. So if you want to come and chat, I'm happy to chat. Otherwise, free to go. Hopefully you learned something today. But thanks for coming and thanks for having me out here.
I want to say thanks for coming out.
Oh, absolutely.
I really did take a lot out of this.
Good, good. I'm glad.
Appreciate it.
If you want the slides, send me an email. I'll send you the slides.
Yeah.
There were some that were content heavy that you can read on at your leisure. But yeah, thanks for coming out. I'm glad you learned something.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan.
Yeah.